You'll know if you should buy Mullet Madjack and on which platform in the next 81 seconds. Here's your TLDR. Mullet Madjack is a gloriously psychotic mechanical reconstruction of arcade-era pressure. It removes the neutral state in shooters entirely. Here, your heal is engagement, not hiding in a corner. You have 10 seconds to live, every kill adds time, and every hesitation is game over. It is a kill-to-live loop that weaponizes your speedrunner anxiety into a coherent, hyper-violent, rhythmic stress test that's so very good. It's like if the protagonist from Trepang Squared started hanging out with the Snuffleupagus that brought us Hotline Miami. Plus, there's a surprisingly unexpected meta-narrative at play here that satirizes itself and the wider world. It's good. Now, on my 9800X 3D and 5090, it is a surgical flatline experience of frame times. Unity 6 handles the neon-soaked chaos without traversal stutter, making this the PC gold standard, effectively, for motion clarity. But all this praise does come with a warning for the Switch launch. Replacing 8000 Hz polling rates on mice with Bluetooth that normally hangs out at 250 or 360 Hz, along with the ancient Tegra X1, does have the potential to change this experience fundamentally. If the hardware hitches, the 10-second timer becomes your enemy, not necessarily a fair mechanic. But for the price of 1.8 burritos, this is a dense, high-calorie shooter that respects your time and your hardware. It is a firm green light for PC. Now, as for console players, sound off in the comments, like, we're going to need to crowdsource this. It's going to depend on how the title translates to both lower refresh rates and slower inputs. If all you wanted was that TLDR, cool, I get it. Thanks for sticking around. Before you go, though, the developer was kind enough to give us an extra key to give away both on the Twitch stream and this video here. So, before you go, if you want, maybe hit the YouTube buttons. Drop your favorite 80s or 90s one-liner in the comments, and whichever one is most upvoted, I'll give a Steam key to. But if you want a more detailed breakdown, stick around. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Squid. I cover mostly action and shooter titles with the occasional essay or gear review, and the rule here really is maximum meaningful info with minimum reaction faces. So what is Mullet Madjack really trying to be? I mean, this isn't just a retro shooter for people who like neon. It is a mechanical reconstruction of that arcade-era pressure I mentioned before. It's almost like if Stun Runner and Hotline Miami had a kid. And that aesthetic isn't just window dressing, either. While the VHS filters and saturated bloom might look like style, they function as high-contrast indicators. Like, even at the most absurd movement speeds this game demands, you can pick out an enemy silhouette against the modular backdrop instantly. It's a visual language designed for the silly high frame rate environment. It's aiming for that one more run addiction that can be found in things like Neon White or Hotline, but with a much more visceral, hyper-violent feedback loop, and it is, quite frankly, delightful in its aggression. So let's talk core gameplay loop. You have to stop thinking about this as a shooter and start viewing it as a rhythmic stress test. The loop is elegantly, if perhaps even cruelly, simple. You have 10 seconds to live. Every kill adds a few precious seconds to that clock. Every floor transition offers a choice of upgrades, rinse, repeat, and try not to have a heart attack or stroke out in the process. But the brilliance here is in the mechanical synergy. This isn't just about clicking on heads, it's about resource management, where the resource is your own heartbeat. The game utilizes a modular floor structure, think Slay the Spire, but at 200 miles an hour. You don't have as much choice about which direction you're going to go. However, you are presented with 3 randomized upgrades. Do you take an upgrade to the revolver that you've been cultivating since the first floor, or do you swap to the fire katana? Do you take the "there's more explosive barrels everywhere" upgrade, knowing that that cuts both ways? Or do you take the one that gives you extra time every time you punt someone into an environmental hazard? Read as wall fans, explosives, vending machines, wires, acid pits. There's a lot. And really, this roguelite layer is what transforms Madjack from a technical demo into a sustainable, enjoyable experience. It forces this constant reevaluation of your kit, at the same time contrasting your own human impulse to just like, no, I gotta go fast. Now, if you've built a projectile-heavy loadout, but the next floor is kind of a cramped hallway, then that loop demands immediate adaptation. And this kill-to-live feedback loop also serves as a really nice pacing governor. It removes the safe way to play. And as I said earlier, in a standard FPS, if you're at 1% health, you hide, you wait for the red glowies around your screen to go away and rinse and repeat. Now, in Madjack, if you're at 1% health, which is effectively 1 second left on the clock, you really don't have a whole lot of choice other than diving headlong into the nearest group of cranky robots and applying boot to face. at the same time hoping that your aim is pixel perfect. It's a design choice that rewards bravery and punishes hesitation with a game over screen. Now, on my 9800X3D and 5090, this loop is a surgical experience. When the upgrade choices pop up, there's no UI lag, no stuttering, just instant tactical decision-making. And for me, this is kinda now, oddly, the gold standard for how a roguelite shooter should flow. If the console versions can't maintain this loop without hitching during the upgrade selection or floor transitions, this mechanical house of cards kinda collapses, and I really hope that's not the case. Further, I'm uncertain about the RNG in the late game floors in the endless mode. For those of you who have pushed pretty far into that mode, does the loop stay balanced, or does it eventually devolve into a one shot or nothing scenario? That's really kind of a critical factor for the long-term Burrito index value, and not something that I'm factoring into my score today because I have a limited amount of time that I can put into each game that I review. The thing that really surprised me was that if you look past the neon-soaked gore and rhythmic executions of unfriendly aristocratic robots, well, I suppose oligarchic would be more apt. There's a layer of narrative cynicism in Mullet Madjack that's surprisingly biting. Hammer 95 hasn't just draped an 80s OVA skin over a shooter. They've created a commentary on the modern attention economy, using the filters of both the past and imagined futures to tell it. And in the world of Madjack, your 10-second life timer isn't just a biological countdown. It is a literal representation of an audience's attention span. You're playing as a moderator in a world obsessed with streaming, likes, and instant gratification. Every kill isn't just for survival, it's for engagement. The game is essentially a satire of the very content meat grinder we're here participating in now. Rip. This meta-narrative serves a functional purpose. It justifies the frantic, disposable nature of the gameplay. The rich people in their high-rise towers, in this case the billionaire robots, aren't watching you because they care about justice. They're watching you because a high refresh rate source of entertainment that could end at any second. It's a Running Man scenario for the TikTok era with a CRT filter strapped on top. And this is really where I think the game's identity truly succeeds. It doesn't give you a timer because, oh, it's a mechanic. It gives you a timer because it's a critique of how we consume media at the same time that it's a mechanic. The fact that the story is told through static, high-quality anime stills during floor transitions rather than bloated, unskippable cutscenes, it's a masterclass in respecting the player's time. It understands that in a game about speed, the narrative must be as lean and high impact as the gunplay. It's a rare instance where the lore of a game actually reinforces the tech proof, and the world demands high-speed violence, and your hardware delivers that violence without the friction of loading screens or narrative bloat, mostly. It's a cynical, loud, and incredibly honest look at the content we've all become accustomed to and participate in the system of. All right, real quick sidebar. I'm curious to see if the Switch audience picks up on this irony. Playing a game about disposable nature of media on a handheld device during a 15-minute commute might be almost too meta. Does that narrative still hit harder when you're literally consuming it in short, desperate bursts? I don't know. Let me know what you think is going to happen in the comments. All right, moving on to performance and settings and ports. Let's talk tech proof, because feeling smooth and being smooth are two very different things. Again, I ran this on the 9800X3D and 5090 at 1440p on a 360Hz monitor. Now, as expected, with that hardware, the gameplay was flawless. And further, motion clarity on a Pulsar monitor with this is an obscenity of success. But that's not why we're here. That's not the headline. The headline is the Unity 6 implementation. And we've seen plenty of Unity titles that struggle with traversal stutter. Yeah, that's the annoying hitch when you move from modular chunks of a level. I recently talked about that in the Morbid Metal video up there, I think. Mullet Madjack, thankfully, appears to be utilizing the GPU resident drawer, I think it is, quite effectively. Now, even on the more complex boss floors, the ones that are filled with particle effects and debris, the frame time is astonishingly a boring, beautiful, flat line. Now, more importantly on PC, for those of us pushing 4,000 or 8,000 Hertz polling on mice, the game handles the CPU interrupt overhead of that high polling rate without breaking a sweat. At these speeds, when you're canceling into a headshot, you need that sub-millisecond response. Now, on my hardware, the input to photon latency is essentially negligible. If you're playing on a system that can actually saturate a high refresh monitor, the mechanical clarity here is unparalleled. It is the definitive way to play the game, and it sets a standard that the console versions are going to have a very difficult time matching. Now let's look at the options menu, because a game really is only as good as its settings, and the degree of granularity a developer chooses to give you over how a game plays tells you a bit about their perspective of development. Now on PC, we have a functional FOV slider, which is mandatory. We have toggles for the CRT flicker and bloom, which is excellent for those who find the default look a bit too Caesar adjacent. And it respects the platform overall. I wasn't cranky when I looked at these options. However, we do kind of need to address the elephant in the room, the switch port. The Tegra X1 is, to put it bluntly, ancient. Mullet Madjack relies on frame time consistency to make its 10-second timer feel fair. And if the Switch version suffers from that typical Unity stutter struggle, the game becomes a chore. You cannot expect a player to maintain a 10-second kill streak if the hardware is dropping inputs or hitching at inconvenient times, which, because that's always that when they pop up, it's never at a convenient time. Why? Then there's latency. Now, I mentioned it briefly a moment ago. I'm used to like 2K, 4K, or 8K polling on mice. The Switch's Bluetooth controllers poll at a fraction of that. Bluetooth usually hangs out in the 250 hertz to 360 hertz. So worst case scenario, you're at a quarter of the low end of what a PC player can expect in terms of input fidelity and input delay. Now that's also actually why it feels comparatively better to play games that you're using frame gen on with a controller versus mouse and keyboard, because that delay is already built in and your brain has accommodated that delay into your actions. But when you combine that with the potential for sub 60 FPS frame pacing, you're not playing the same game I am. You're playing a compromised version of it. So really, I'm putting the call out to y'all here. I finished this on a 5090. It's a dream. It's so very good. But if you pick this up on Switch or Xbox, sound off in the comments. Are you seeing those frame rate dips during the kill streak slow motion? Is the Joy-Con lag making the dashes feel like a roll of a dice? We really need to know if the port is solid for portability or recall grade or wait and hope for patches grade in terms of technical limitations. And this leads us, of course, to the verdict and the Burrito Index. Now, if you're new here, the Burrito Index is how I measure games with one simple question. Would I have gotten more enjoyment and dopamine from an equivalent dollar amount of Al Pastor burritos? And at its current price point, Mullet Madjack is an incredible value here. We're talking about 1.8 burritos before any seasonal discounts for a game that provides dozens of hours of high-intensity mechanical joy. And stress, if I'm honest. It's both. I'm sure German has a word for that combination. If you know it, put it in the comments. It's a dense, high-calorie piece of software that's so very tasty but still wants you leaving more. And really, the filter here is simple. It's a firm buy if you have a high refresh setup, enjoy precision mousing, and a desire to feel like a cyborg in a 1987 anime that had a kid with Cyberpunk and Judge Dredd. That's a firm pass if you suffer from motion sickness or you think tactical means sitting in a quarter for 20 minutes. Now, my final verdict here for Mullet Madjack on PC is a firm green light. It's technically proficient, consumer-friendly, mechanically honest. It doesn't waste your time with corporate fluff or battle passes. It just asks you to play well and play fast. Really, the question here is that we need to wait and see how the Switch hardware can keep up with that ambition. Because on PC, this is as good as arcade shooters get. I've been BaldSquid. If you've made it this far, the robots at YouTube think you'll likely enjoy the video over there. I'll see you next time.